Hey, today we're going to be talking about Ishmael Reed. Ishmael Reed is a black American author. Um, I wanted to make a video about a black American author specifically because this is the end of Black History Month and I haven't yet made a video on one. I chose Ishmael Reed because if I'm focusing on black Americans, my list is not very long. It could be Toni Morrison, but the downfall with me choosing, or the problem with me choosing Toni Morrison would have been that I frankly don't have as much biographical knowledge as some people may. And further, although I've read all of her novels, some of them it's been several years since I've read those novels. So I don't remember all of the books as well. The other choice would have been James Baldwin. And I've read 4 of James Baldwin's novels, but I'd like to actually finish James Baldwin. I do have that Library of America set for him, and I'd like to do that in my own time. So I didn't want to just read one more James Baldwin novel and make a video on the 5 total that I would have read. So that left me with a black American writer who I've read more than 1 or 2 novels from. I would choose Ishmael Reed. Again, I could be talking about Africans, but it seems like Black History Month is really more of an American thing, so I wanted to focus on America. When I first heard about Ishmael Reed, it was in the context of this book. This is Henry Louis Gates Jr.'s The Signifying Monkey. I had watched a video on a non-Marxist critique of ideology, and this book was referenced in that video. I looked into the book before reading it and learned that Ishmael Reed was a postmodern American writer, and I thought, oh, that would be interesting to read a black postmodernist because I hadn't read any. I read Mumbo Jumbo, but we'll get to that. For right now, just what I want to focus on is that Henry Louis Gates Jr. is a great source for literary information on Ishmael Reed. Again, he is where I've learned about that. So, if this all sounds interesting to you, I have only read 4 of Ishmael Reed's books, but we're going to review those 4 to the best of my ability, seeing as I read some of them, a few years back. I'm Mark, and if you're interested in all of this, this is several books. Okay, so I'm not going to be reviewing the books in the order that I read them. It was not chronological. I'm going to be reviewing the books as they were written and published. The first Ishmael Reed book I have to talk about is Yellowback Radio Broke Down. I read this Ishmael Reed book because it was listed on Larry McGafferty's top 100 books of the 20th century. It's mostly an American list. I believe it winds up somewhere around number 70 or 80 on that list. As far as the book goes, it's in these sections of paragraphs like that. Ishmael Reed is always playing with words on the page. So in other works of Ishmael Reed, you get hand-drawn images and things like that. I can't remember this book super well, and I only read it probably 3 or 4 years ago, maybe 3, I think. I see it often compared to the, I think it's Mel Brooks' movie Blazing Saddles. I don't see a connection to Blazing Saddles when I read this. There is a black cowboy as the main character, but beyond that, it's a very different book that I remember. It is not a politically correct novel, which might surprise some people, given that Ishmael Reed is somebody who is a vocal advocate for plurality in the world. And now that we're on that, I'll say that most of his stories deal with having multiple stories or histories of a subject. I don't really have a huge amount else to say about this. I know I haven't talked much about the plot, but the reason I haven't talked much about the plot is because there's not much of a plot. This is kind of more like a William Burroughs book, where you're getting a Hieronymus Bosch type image of a place, and the place you're getting an image of is Yellowback Radio Broke Down. I don't know if that full title was the name of the town or if it's just Yellowback Radio, I think. But this is my least favorite of the 4 books that I've read of his. If I reread it, I wouldn't be surprised if I liked it more, but I read this very quickly. It was a few years ago, and I just remember being surprised that some of the humor wasn't exactly politically correct, but it's an interesting book. This was, I believe, one of his first novels. I don't know if it was his first novel. If somebody showed me this as a first novel and said, this guy just published this, he's a young dude, take a look at this book, I'd read it and be like, wow, I really want to know what's going to happen to them. And with Ishmael Reed, he does get better as he goes on. But for what it's worth, what I remember of the book, the diversity of characters that kind of make up this environment, and focusing sort of on the black cowboy, the whole idea is interesting. Let's give it a B. So I'm going to say this is like a B work. So that's Yellowback Radio Broke Down. That's a B. The second Ishmael Reed novel that I read is the one that I read first, rather. In publication order, this is the second. This is Mumbo Jumbo. And there are a few things that I need to touch on with Mumbo Jumbo. The first thing is there is a plurality of characters. The book doesn't really have a central one so much because it's jumping around to the different characters for different sections so often. The idea is that there's this, let's call it an infection called Just Grew, and it's basically getting black people in the U.S. to dance and do tribal things. It winds up being a kind of a, it's not really a metaphor because it's so transparent, but it's about the plurality of potential histories of different people in the United States. The book has a lot of different textual things. You can see there's a business card, I think. We've got some drawings. Let me see if I can find one of those real quick. Here's another thing. There might be some photos as well, but there's that. Here we've got a handwritten letter. So this was a really great book. I'm really glad that I went out and I read the book when I heard about it through Henry Louis Gates Jr. I love this novel. I think it is an unsung hero of the postmodernist movement. This is every bit as good as like a Thomas Pynchon novel or a William Gaddis, and I really recommend that people go out and read it. Further, one thing is that it has more of an emotional gut punch than some postmodern work as far as the social significance of the work. It's very much talking about the different narratives that are kind of necessary for different people in society. So Mumbo Jumbo by Ishmael Reed is an S-tier novel. The next novel that I want to talk about is Flight to Canada. I read this slightly more recently than Mumbo Jumbo. I can't remember if I would have read this before Yellowback Radio broke down. The book is, there is a plurality of characters again. So that's one thing Ishmael Reed does in 3 of the 4 books. There's so many characters, it's kind of hard to keep track of everybody. You end up getting impressions of a place and a time and so forth, more than just things about, or specifically a character. In that sense, there's a kind of quality similar to a William Burroughs book here. But this is about people fleeing to Canada in order to escape slavery in the United States. What I want to talk about mostly with this book is that it's an ahistoric or anachronistic piece of historical fiction. So things are intentionally done that are clearly not of that time period. And the example that I want to give for this is that Abraham Lincoln is a character. However, in the book, Abraham Lincoln is black, and he likes to watch the news TV show 60 Minutes. So I believe he's watching 60 Minutes on a couch or something at one point in the novel. This kind of cartoony humor permeates the whole thing. I would say that this is an S as well, similar to Mumbo Jumbo. So that's Flight to Canada. I love this novel. I thought it was very funny, and I strongly recommend it. This is Flight to Canada, and that's an S. The last book that I'm going to talk about is the Ishmael Reed book I read most recently, and I finished this book this morning. I'm most equipped to talk about it because I finished it this morning. As with other Ishmael Reed books, there are images throughout the book. Think of something, this has more in common with something like a Kathy Acker or a Kurt Vonnegut or something than a picture book. It's not that simple. The book is about a community college prof. And it's funny because the community college prof at one point meets Ishmael Reed, who wrote the book. But basically, he gets caught up in public debates about whether or not slavery was a positive thing. Clearly, it's not, and this guy is taking the position that it's not positive. So he becomes a public intellectual of sorts. But the thing is that he's not as big a name as the right-wing headliner of the debates, who's arguing that slavery was a benevolent institution. And the book kind of deals with different aspects of Californian culture, race relations in the U.S., and it's a contemporary book. I believe it was published in 2020, and in general, I would say it was a very good representation of that time. So I haven't read a huge amount of stuff that discusses contemporary current events and does so very well. But I thought that this, all things considered, it's a satire. It was a good book. I enjoyed it a lot. There are a lot of things about India in here that I think might raise some eyebrows. So he's not attacking India, but there are some questions that I have about India after reading this book, things that I hadn't heard before. Yeah, it's a great book. I don't know what else to say about it. I'd like to give this an A. This is not the best postmodern book I've ever read. Maybe a B plus. Let's say B plus A minus. It's not the best postmodern work I've ever read, but it is a more conventional story than Ishmael Reed typically writes, based on the 4 I've read. And there's a lot of humor in here. It's a very interesting public intellectual, a community college professor. I believe Ishmael Reed did teach at a community college for a period, but that's something we don't typically see in the literature of America. We're typically talking about like Harvard professors and so forth. All right, though. So that's a B plus or an A minus. That's Conjugating Hindi is the name of that book. Conjugating Hindi. Yeah, I don't have a whole lot else to say about Ishmael Reed or anything else. I did recently finish a book by Volman called The Lucky Star. I didn't love the book, but I figured I'd mention that it was something that I had read recently because I didn't talk about it on video yet. I don't have a whole lot else to say. Thanks everybody for watching. Please like and subscribe if you can. Otherwise, I've been Mark, and this is Several Books. Bye bye.